Hello everyone! Today I'll be starting my rewrite of the Pokemon anime with Ash's Kanto journey. It only felt right to start my universe in the same way the original did. Also, the teams I showed in my Ash's Teams Redone video may be a little different here, but without further ado, let's hop in. 10-year-old Ash Ketchum sits in his room, watching a Pokemon battle. The fight is between the champion Lance and the previous year's Indigo League winner. The battle is both trainers down to their last Pokemon, Lance with his Dragonite and the trainer his Charizard. Ash watches intensely as his mom storms into his room. Ash, you have to go to bed. You don't want to miss out tomorrow. Ash agrees, since tomorrow is the day he gets his first Pokemon. As Ash falls asleep, he dreams about what starter he's going to choose. But while dreaming, Ash accidentally breaks his alarm clock. The next morning, Ash would awake to his mom scolding him for sleeping in. Ash would quickly rush to Professor Oak's lab for a starter. Ash arrives and Professor Oak says, annoyed, "Well, it seems you finally decided to show up." Ash would apologize and then go to choose his starter. "Squirtle, I choose you." However, the Pokeball is empty, and Ash realizes then that all the Pokeballs are. Ash asks Oak if there's a starter for him. Oak would then grab a Pokeball off his desk. Ash would open up the Pokeball and a small yellow rodent would pop out. "His name is Pikachu," Oak would say. Ash would be amazed, running up and hugging Pikachu. Then Ash would get shocked. Ash would quickly learn that Pikachu isn't keen on listening. Nonetheless, Ash would head out on his journey with Pikachu by his side. As Ash exits Oak's lab, he would see two trainers battling. Ash would run up, dragging Pikachu behind him, seeing a battle between a Squirtle and a Bulbasaur. The two trainers are Gary and Richie. Gary's Squirtle would be hit hard by a Razor Leaf before retaliating with a tackle, knocking Richie's Bulbasaur out. Richie would thank Gary for the battle, but Gary would just shrug it off. Ash would then run up, challenging Gary to a fight. Gary would say, "If I could beat one Torp, I don't see why I can't beat two." Gary would send Squirtle back out, while Ash would send in Pikachu. However, after the battle starts, Pikachu would just lie down and nap. Ash would beg Pikachu to battle, but he would ignore him. Gary would then recall his Squirtle, saying, "I'm not going to battle a trainer who can't even control his Pokemon." And then he would walk off. Richie would follow Gary, and Ash would be left alone. Ash would then drag Pikachu off onto Route 1. As the two traveled the route, Ash would try to connect to Pikachu, but he wouldn't want any of it. Ash, then wanting a Pokemon that would actually listen to him, attempts to catch a Pidgey. If there's a Pokeball, and it would shake once, then Pidgey would escape, flying away. Pikachu would laugh, but Ash wouldn't think it's funny. Then Ash would come across a Spearow. He would throw a rock at the Spearow's head, trying to weaken it. However, the Spearow would call its herd, and they would start charging at Ash and Pikachu. Ash and Pikachu would run until Pikachu would trip. A Spearow would charge at him, but Ash would dive in the way, saving Pikachu. It's at this moment Pikachu would realize that Ash isn't that bad. Then Pikachu would fire off a full-power Thunder Shock, defeating the entire herd of Spearow. Pikachu would then faint from exhaustion. Ash would pick Pikachu up, knowing he had a new partner. We now pick up in the Viridian City Pokemon Center. Ash would be getting his Pikachu healed. Misty would enter, needing to get her Pokemon healed. Ash and Misty would talk for a little while their Pokemon get healed. While talking, Misty would tell Ash that he was a Water-type specialist. Ash would laugh at this, saying, "Using only one type? That's stupid." This would aggravate Misty, causing her to challenge Ash to a battle. Ash would select Pikachu and Misty Staryu. At first, Ash and Pikachu would struggle, since it's their first time battling together. Ash would call for a tackle, and it would connect, knocking Staryu back. Then Misty would tell Staryu to use Water Pulse, and it would hit Pikachu dead on. Ash would call for Pikachu to use Thunder Shock, but Staryu would use her speed to dodge. Staryu would retaliate with a confusion, slamming Pikachu into the ground. Pikachu would look weakened, but Ash would call for a Thunder Shock, this time connecting, knocking Staryu out. Misty would be furious, declaring that it was all beginner's luck. Then she would storm off. Then Ash would set off with Pikachu into the Viridian Forest. While traveling through the forest, Ash would encounter a tiny bug crawling on a tree branch. Ash would point his Pokedex at it, learning that the Pokemon is called Weedle. Ash, being inexperienced, would just toss a Pokeball. However, Weedle's low level would let him be caught. Ash would then immediately let Weedle out of his ball to get to know him. Ash would continue through the forest until encountering a Pidgeotto. Ash would send Weedle out to battle, but he would struggle severely. Weedle's weakness to flying would make the battle difficult. However, not wanting to upset his trainer, Weedle would evolve into Kakuna, learning hard. Ash would be ecstatic with the evolution, then calling for a Poison Sting. The attack would connect and poison the Pidgeotto, but the Pidgeotto, not wanting to be injured further, would fly off. This would upset Ash, but he would realize that it doesn't matter because his Weedle evolved, and he was just happy about that. Ash would venture deeper into the forest, then meeting a boy dressed like a samurai. The boy would tell Ash of his battles with other trainers from Pallet, each using one of the starters and defeating him. He would then declare that he must battle Ash. The battle would be a 2-on-2, and Ash would lead Kakuna, while Samurai would lead Metapod. However, Kakuna would easily win, actually being able to attack with Poison Sting. The Samurai would be upset, but would send out his second Pokemon, Pinsir. Ash would call for a flurry of Hardens, hoping it would let Kakuna live the attacks. However, Pinsir would grab Kakuna, squeezing him in his horns. Kakuna would continue to harden, but the Pinsir would just squeeze harder. Eventually, Kakuna's cocoon would crack. Ash would be horrified, thinking his Kakuna had died. Except, then a flurry of light would happen, and Beedrill would emerge, now knowing Fury Attack. Ash would call for one, and it would do good damage to Pinsir. Pinsir would go for a Vice Grip, but Beedrill would dodge. Beedrill would dodge another Vice Grip. Then he would connect with a 5-hit Fury Attack. This would be enough to defeat the Pinsir. The Samurai would commend Ash's strength, saying that he was just as strong as the other trainers of Pallet. Ash would then leave the forest with Pikachu and Beedrill, seeing Pewter on the horizon. On the outskirts of Pewter City, Ash would meet Flint. Flint would warn Ash that Brock was really strong, but Ash would ignore him, heading right for his gym battle. Ash would enter the gym, and Brock would ask Ash how many badges he had. After hearing he had none, he would grab 2 Pokeballs from his collection, and then he would declare, the battle will be a 2-on-2, and when one side has no Pokemon left, they have lost the battle. Ash would nod, and the battle would begin. Brock would leave with Geodude, and Ash would leave with Beedrill. Ash would call for a Fury Attack, but it would do little damage. Brock would then shout, Rock types resist normal type attacks. Then he would call for a Rock Throw, knocking Beedrill back. Then saying, and Rock type attacks are super effective against bugs. Ash would then call for a Harden followed up by a Poison Sting. The Poison Sting wouldn't do much damage, but it would poison Brock's Geodude. Beedrill would go for another Harden before charging him with a Twin Needle. Again, it wouldn't do much damage, but the chip from Poison would help him defeat the Geodude. Brock would say, impressive, overcoming that type advantage, but it won't happen again. Then Brock would send out Onix. Ash would say to Beedrill, are you still good to fight? Beedrill would nod and would head to the fight. Beedrill would try the Harden Poison Sting combo again, but a powerful Rock Tomb from Onix would take Beedrill out. Ash would return to Beedrill, telling him he did a good job. Then Ash would say, Pikachu, I choose you, and Pikachu would leap off his shoulder into battle. Ash would start off calling for a Thunder Shock, but it wouldn't do any damage. Brock would explain to Ash that ground types are immune to electric type attacks. Ash would then call for a tackle, connecting, but not doing a lot of damage. Onix would land a powerful tackle, knocking Pikachu off the field and out of the battle. Brock would declare that Ash had lost, and he would be upset. Brock would suggest that maybe he pick better Pokemon to bring next time, so he could use a type advantage. Ash would then stroll around Pewter City, thinking about how he will win his rematch. Then Ash would run back into Flint. Let me guess, you lost to Brock, Flint would say. Ash would nod. But then Flint would offer to help train Ash's Pikachu. However, instead of supercharging him, he would help teach him a new move, Submission. Ash and Pikachu would train with Flint for a few days to master the move. While training for those days, Ash would learn that Brock has to take care of his 9 siblings. After all that training, Flint would tell Ash he believes he is ready for his rematch. Ash would storm back into the gym. However, for the rematch, all of Brock's siblings would be in attendance. Ash would ignore them, but they are being very loud. Brock would explain how it's the same rules as last time, 2-on-2 battle. Ash would lead Beedrill, and Brock would say, I assume with all that time you had, you might have caught a Pokemon with a type advantage, before sending out Geodude. The battle would be similar to the first time around. Beedrill would use Harden and Poison Sting, getting a poison on Geodude. Beedrill would weave in between rock throws and tackles, landing Twin Needles and Fury Attacks. It wouldn't do much damage, but the chip, combined with the poison, would be enough to defeat the Geodude. Last out for Brock would be Onix. Beedrill would get a few good hits in, landing a Twin Needle and a Fury Attack. However, Rockton from Onix would knock Beedrill out. Pikachu would then leap off Ash's shoulder, letting the final battle begin. Pikachu would dodge a tackle, then striking back with a submission, doing big damage. Brock would then say, I see what you spent so much time working on now, before calling out for a Rock Tomb, and landing it for big damage. Ash would yell at Pikachu, telling him everything would be okay. Ash would then call for another submission, landing and knocking Onix back. Onix would stand back up, then charging in for a tackle, hitting Pikachu hard, sending him flying into the wall of the gym. Pikachu, however, would stand back up and would land another submission, this time defeating the Onix. Brock would then declare Ash the winner, and Ash would start celebrating. However, Brock's siblings would stop Brock from giving Ash his badge, saying, He must have cheated. There's no way he could have beat you. Brock would explain that Ash won fair and square, but his siblings still wouldn't want to believe that. Ash would take his badge and set off for his next gym battle. As Ash was leaving Pewter, Brock would chase him down, asking if he could travel with him. Brock would explain to Ash that Ash could really benefit from his experience as a gym leader going on his journey. Ash would accept this, but then when asked Brock about what he's going to do with his siblings, Brock would realize this, knowing that he can't leave. But then Flint would come, and he would reveal to Brock that he was his dad. Flint would then tell Brock that he would watch his siblings so he could travel the world and follow his dreams. Brock would thank his dad, hugging him. Then they would set off together, Ash and Brock, our duo. That's where I want to leave the story off for today. I know as of now, there hasn't been too many big changes, besides not traveling with Misty and no Team Rocket. But if you guys have any suggestions or critiques that you would make to the series to make it better, let me know. I want this to be as best as it can. So anything you think would make it better, any Pokemon you think Ash should catch, just let me know in the comments down below. Have a great day, Poke fans. Goodbye.